Hey, what's going on? Welcome to the Doug Show. This is Doug Cunnington, and I'm going to answer a couple questions. Actually, in this episode, I'm just going to answer one question that was sent in by a listener and a YouTube viewer and hopefully a blog reader. So this is from Phil, and I appreciate you sending in the question, Phil. And the question is, what sort of traffic should I expect after about 6 months? And maybe how much earnings, maybe how much traffic after a year, and that sort of thing. And before I get to the answer and the sort of long-winded explanation, and I'm going to tell you the punchline right away, there's no real answer for this, but I will give you some guidelines, some benchmarks to maybe have an idea how your site is doing in your progress. So before I get into that, I want to mention a couple things. If you're not on the Niche Site Project email list, I highly encourage you to check it out. Head over to Niche Site Project, hit the green button. I'll send you a bunch of templates, and there's an autoresponder series there where you will get helpful emails that sort of shows you around some of the content. Again, it's very helpful. In many cases, I am showing you a case study. I'm showing you how to do things. It's actionable. So there are a couple sales emails in there. I'll tell you that as well, but not too many. It's mostly just information. And the big thing is you get all those fantastic templates that I've honed over time. So that is point number one. Point number two is if you have questions, you can leave a voicemail. You can send me an email as well. I'm not going to read out the phone number because I can't remember what it is, but it's in the show notes. So all you have to do is look at your show notes, and you probably can just click on it and make the call, leave a voicemail. It's great if you're in a quiet environment. I haven't gotten many voicemails, but I want to get more. So please do leave a message. And if you don't want to leave a message, you can send the email. So feedback@doug.show. That's the email address. I have that pretty sweet domain, I think, doug.show. And you could just write your question in there. Again, that's how Phil sent in this question. On to the answer. So the root of this is Phil wants to know if he's on the right track, basically. People are not sure if they're behind the curve as far as what they should expect for traffic on their site. And it's really hard to answer because, well, number one, a lot of the success stories that I cover, a lot of times it's people that are doing this full time. So maybe they started a site and they're putting in, 8 or 10 hours a day. They're working on weekends and they're obsessed. And a couple people that I could point out where you can go, check out their episodes. I don't remember what they are off the top of my head, but Evan, Ellen, Duke, people were able to put in a lot of time, and you could just search the archive of these podcast episodes and find their success stories. Some people have been on more than once. So basically, if someone's working full time on something and they have money to invest, or they have maybe a little bit of an advantage because they were a professional writer like Evan, or they've been writing for years like Duke, or they just have they've had a successful blog in the past like Ellen, they have a little bit of a leg up. So it's really hard to tell, are you on the right trajectory? So I guess one thing that I want to convey is try not to compare yourself to other people, especially these exception cases for the success stories. Because basically, if you're comparing yourself to someone who has way more experience, more time, more resources, more everything, it's going to feel bad. It's going to suck. And I mean, I was there too, and I do the same thing now, by the way. It never goes away, all right? So it never goes away. You're always looking at your peers, at other people that are ahead of you, maybe a few weeks, a few months, or maybe a few years ahead of you. And that's where it really feels bad. And again, it doesn't go away. You just have to understand, all right, I'm on month 5, I'm on year 5, and someone else is on a different trajectory and they have 15 years of experience, and it's a little bit easier for them to get started. So with that out of the way, try not to compare yourself too much. Just know that things are possible and you can do things faster as you develop skills in different areas. And I think as you develop more skills in more diverse areas, you may be able to piece them together into a very interesting combination, where maybe you're the only one that has that unique set of skills. And you don't have to be that great at them. If you have a unique set, you could be for example, a mediocre project manager, a mediocre like corporate employee. You can also maybe you may not be a great speaker like myself right now, but somehow launch a podcast and have people listen to it, right? So even with all my limitations, the unique combination of putting marketing in there, and I'm a bad copywriter as well, but put it all together, and it's kind of it's a nice combination where I can eke out a living and feel good about it. I can make my own decisions and stuff. So, like most of my digressions, I end up just talking about myself. But the point is, you can end up with a unique combination. So try not to compare yourself too much. And I will leave it at that, at least for right now, in this discussion. And we can move on to the next part. So, like, how much traffic should you see? All right, I'm going to make a few assumptions here, and it will vary for everyone. So keep that in mind. Let's assume you could put in about 1 hour per day, 5 days a week for a few months. All right. So we'll say 3 to 4 months, a few months. If you're able to do that and you know what you're working on whenever you sit down to, work on that 1 hour, like 5 times per week, 5 to 7 times per week, we'll give a little flexibility there. And you are effectively working on stuff, right? You're not sitting down and reading like 4 blog posts and then you're like, oh, wait, I have to watch this YouTube video. And then 45, 50 minutes go by and you like lose your hour and you actually didn't do shit. Like, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about sitting down and you're writing a blog post. You knock out 1,000 words in an hour, like that sort of thing. Or you're doing some activity each time you sit down. You're not trying to figure out what to do. If you can do that, I would assume within like 2 to 3 months that you're getting somewhere between, on the low end, probably 10 visitors per day, up to maybe a couple hundred per day. Now, there are so many variables involved here. I didn't mention like how much content you publish, and we'll make some assumptions about that. I didn't mention if you're doing any promotional activities. So we can get into that as well. And the point is, you're putting in a lot of time. If you're putting in, an hour per day for an extended period, 90 to 120 days, basically, if you do anything, whatever it is, for that many hours, for 90 to 120 days, you are going to make progress unless you are like just very ineffective and misguided, right? So like if you're wasting your time, then all right, you're not going to be making much progress. But basically, if you are actually dedicated to whatever endeavor you're trying to accomplish there, you're going to make a lot of progress in 90 to 120 days. So with that in mind, it's all about like consistently showing up. Some days are going to be a wash. I mentioned you got to sit down, you got to get shit done. You can't be distracted and researching things and then off task. But some days are going to suck and maybe you're not going to feel that great. You'll be a little distracted, or maybe there's some, domestic sort of distraction where your kids are sick or your dog is sick or whatever, you're sick, right? So there's going to be a day or two where it's just a throwaway, and that's okay. Generally, if I can get like 2 or 3 days a week where I'm like, wow, I got a lot done, that's awesome, right? That's great. There's going to be some days that are just throwaway. So keep that in mind, and don't beat yourself up too much if you have an off day. It is totally fine. So how much traffic after 6 months. So this varies quite a bit, and we'll come back and make some assumptions. And I looked at my notes and I realized, what am I even talking about here? I just had a big cup of coffee. Full disclosure here. So I had a big cup of coffee, and for the people who are keeping up, I did take some nootropics today. I took it was the creativity formula from Find My Formula. So I'm enjoying that today. I'm about to do a couple interviews with some folks and do some recording. So I thought I would try the creativity formula versus the clarity formula, which is the one that I had been taking, or I currently take whenever I'm doing a lot of recording. So anyway, complete digression there. And that is what happens sometimes when you sit down to do some work. You get distracted. So don't do that. Back to the topic at hand here. So let's assume you're launching your site with about 10 posts, half informational and half affiliate review type content. You want to have that balance for, Amazon to, like your site, right? They don't want you to have all advertising content, and then Google doesn't want you to have all affiliate content, all advertising content. They want a balance. So 50-50 is kind of what I keep up. If you wanted to publish a little more informational content, that is totally fine. I think in a lot of ways that could be beneficial in the long run. It may be a little bit lower revenue in the short term, but in the long run, you'll have more traffic to your site. And I think it's a good thing, maybe even faster. So let's say you have 10 posts that you launch with, and you start promoting the site through networking and social media for as soon as you publish it, you're just working on publishing content, then promoting it for a few weeks, and then publishing more content and promoting it for a few weeks. Let's also assume that you have a bit of a budget and you're able to publish for example, those first 10 posts within the first month. All right. Let's say you hire a writer or two, or you work with a content company like Content Refined, and you have them write the first set of content. And then after that, maybe you have a subscription basis or something like that, and you're doing some of the writing yourself so that you're able to publish, let's say, 4 to 6 posts per month. So at that point, you're going to have a handful of posts, over 20 within a few months there. If I did the math right, there's a range there because everybody's working at a different speed. So you have like 20 posts or something like that. My hunch is over the course of the first 6 months, it's going to grow very slowly. You are dealing with a Google sandbox. And the Google sandbox, if you're unfamiliar, is the concept is an unproven, sort of maybe even mythical, I would say, concept that if you start a new site, it's not going to rank as well as it could if it was over 6 months old. And word on the street is from several people that I've talked to is you see a 6 month just an increase in growth, and then after 12 months, so 1 year, you see another increase in growth. It may or may not be what people call as a hockey stick. My hunch is those are exception cases. We're talking a lot about exception cases because those are the ones we hear about most of the time because they're sexy headlines and we want to hear those, exciting, inspiring stories, but they are a bit misleading. So my hunch is you will see a little bit more growth after 6 months, and you will see a little bit more growth after 12 months. And for the math nerds, the slope of the line is going to increase just a little bit there. All right. So it's just going to grow a little bit faster. And at 6 months, I would venture that you're probably getting 100 visitors per day, up to maybe about 500 or so, depending on how much work you put in ahead of time. It is all dependent on how much work and resources and effort that you put into it, whether it's for the content side. I know a lot of people, I guess it's partially my fault, but a lot of people are like, I'm going to publish 200 articles or 400 articles or whatever, and no link building. I'm just going to do it all without link building. And it is possible. But if you add links to the equation, you typically are going to get a good return. Now, small digression again, but at least this one's relevant. I got an email from a reader and a student from Five Figure Niche site, and they were talking about not seeing much of an impact from the links that they built over the past year. And I've heard that from a few people, and they were like, I don't think link building helps. That's my observation based on my own site. And they're right. I mean, like on their site, it doesn't seem to have really helped, but it's basically one of the top ranking factors, and most SEO folks would agree that links help a site rank. Now, as far as like how important it is for the website owner to engage in link building, that's up for a lot of debate. Some people say, don't do anything like that. But you generally will find sites that are ranking well, they have more links than the sites that aren't ranking that well. And even if it's not working out in the short term, I believe over time, it probably will work out. If you get links from quality sources and quality websites, that is probably a good thing. So that said, we will sort of just shift abruptly to the social media aspect. So in the early days of your site, by the way, I don't do much with social media, just not my thing. But the early days of your site, you may be able to get the majority of your traffic from social media. So if you didn't listen to the interview with Christy, I think that was episode 10. I just happened to remember that one. She got a lot of traffic, like hundreds of visitors per day within the first, if I remember right, like 60 to 90 days. Hundreds of visitors per day, right? Like significant traffic early on in her site. She wasn't getting much organic traffic from Google, but that's okay. Like she wasn't going to be able to rank that well that quickly for a brand new site. But what she was able to do is utilize Pinterest and utilize it effectively and pin things and share things and do some outreach in various ways, which again, you could go check out the episode if you want to hear a little bit more about what she was doing. But at the end of the day, she was able to get like 75% of her traffic in that first 90-day period from like Pinterest and some other social media, which is fantastic because where else is she going to get the traffic? Basically nowhere, right? So like she's not going to run ads. That wouldn't be profitable. It wouldn't really be helpful as far as an ROI. But in the short term, she was able to get traffic to her site, make a few sales. Quick wins are important, right? Like if you're putting all this time and effort and money into a site and maybe your partner, spouse, friends, family, whatever, they are looking at you spending all this time and money and they're wondering, are you actually making any money yet? Generally, the answer is no, because early on it's tough to do it. But if you can get a few sales in the door, at least you have that to keep you motivated and for potentially people asking about what you're working on and why you're spending all this time working on these online projects. You could say, well, I'm making a few sales, it's starting to work out. Of course, you make like $3, but you've spent like, $300 or $3,000. It's hard to like make that argument work, but at least it's momentum, right? At least it's growing. So quick little update. I know that I need to do another interview with Christy, but she recently hit $500 and has continued to, grow the traffic to her site. And at least I think it was maybe in like, February or March. So several months after the, actually, I'm getting my timeline off here, but the point is, at this point now that Christy's site has moved past the sandbox period after 6 months, she's getting, 70, 80% of her traffic organically from Google, which is what you want because that is traffic that has hopefully some buyer intent and you don't have to continually babysit the social media aspect of it. And that, in my opinion, that's the flaw with relying on social media is you have to continually feed the beast. Algorithms change. Yes, you can use tools to automate certain things, but again, I have low interest in social media. I personally don't like it. I try to not to consume too much, except for Instagram pictures. Those are fun. Those are fun to look at and get distracted with. But, like puppies and stuff, that really gets me. And some of the stories out there are pretty hilarious. But the point is, social media is a very active way to get traffic, in my opinion. If you disagree, I would love to hear from you. Send me an email, feedback@doug.show. Just in my opinion, it takes a lot of time, and I personally don't find it enjoyable. So by me eliminating things that are not enjoyable, it makes me happier. So that's just a little life tip right there. And I've droned on enough here. So at the end of the day, I will say that within 6 months, if you're doing generally the right things most of the time, and you've published reasonable amount of content, you probably should be getting a few hundred visitors per day. As far as revenue, which is like really what a lot of people care about, it depends on like the spread, the distribution of where the traffic is going. So if you have, a lot of your traffic going to, for example, informational posts, then you may not be converting as many visitors over. You may have some ads on those informational posts, and that could be fine. But it all depends on the distribution of where the traffic's going. So with that said, in general, I would expect on average, right? There's so many variables, but on average, after about 6 months, I would expect, the average person to be making about $100 a month or so. I have seen it, as low as $20 a month and as high as, several thousand, even for a beginner, right? So there's a huge variance, and a lot of the factors that come into play are, one could be around timing, one could be around previous skills. Again, if you're a writer, you have a huge advantage over someone who is not a writer and isn't in that world. And even if you're not like a professional writer or journalist or something like that, you still may have like a strong writing background depending on like what your degree is in. For example, I have an engineering degree. So my writing background kind of sucks, and I have a inferiority complex about my writing and just my grammar skills in general. So that's been like a huge thing for me to overcome, considering I write a lot of content at this point in time. So I think we covered everything we needed to here. And thanks again to Phil for sending in the question. If you have questions, leave me a voicemail, shoot me an email, and we'll probably put it on the show. So everybody have a great day. We'll catch you next time. Thank you so much for listening to The Doug Show. I really do appreciate it. I mean, I'm just sitting here at my computer recording stuff, and you're listening to it, and I think that's awesome. If you enjoy the show and you know someone who maybe would be interested in it, please let them know. I think it would be fantastic if you help spread the word. If you are not signed up for the Niche Site Project email list, well, you're in luck. All you have to do is go to nichesiteproject.com, click the green button, enter your name and email address, and I'll send you a bunch of cool stuff about affiliate marketing, productivity, including all my templates. If you happen to not be subscribed to this podcast, please do subscribe, and don't forget, I welcome your questions. So you could send your emails to feedback@doug.show. I got that really cool domain, doug.show, that's it. So feedback@doug.show, or I'm going to leave my voicemail number in the show notes. So all you have to do is give me a buzz, leave a voicemail, and then I'll potentially put you on the air. So looking forward to it, and we'll catch you next time.